All right, everyone. This is a video I kind of went back and forth on whether to make it or not. Mainly because I wanted my YouTube channel to be about uh, things I really enjoy, um, movies, obviously action figures, hobbies, and to have interaction conversations with people that wanted to talk about these things or I found very interesting. Um, the reason why I didn't want to, I went back for this video too, was that it's about something that, you know, it's about politics and it's just kind of creeped into everything. I've seen a lot of content lately in the collector's space, in YouTube, ToyTube, um, about about this topic. And I hear a lot of people arguing about it. But I don't think people really understand why it's happening. Um, yeah, and you can't really do anything about something unless you know why it happened. Um, you so just a little bit of background on myself where I begin. So I and one of the things, like I said, if these check any boxes for you, and you go, well, I didn't know this about him, so therefore I don't like him now. Just go ahead, that's fine. I don't care. But I consider myself to be a conservative, both politically and socially conservative. But I really don't think a lot of people understand, what that is. With that. Also, for about a period of 4 years, I actually worked as a grassroots community organizer for an organization that was uh, focused on veterans and veterans reform. And as such, I trained I trained political activists. So I taught, I learned, I read, and I taught people tactics, how to advance political ideas in the public space. So, so I kind of know, and I still kind of locally keep my fingers in some political things locally as well. So these aren't just ideas I came up with or I read in a book somewhere, which I had to do a lot of reading, um, as well. But these are things I've actually seen in practice, have put into practice as well. Also, too, I come from a generation, and I'm a proud Generation X. So I remember, um, uh, pre 2000 life fairly clearly, and I read a lot of uh, uh, stuff. I've read, things for both what people would consider liberal ideas and conservative ideas, libertarian, communist, socialist, all in between. I personally met and have spoken to people that have fled, some not so nice countries. I served in the military for a while as a United States Marine, and I actually, granted it was Japan, but at least I've gotten out of this country and seen a little bit of the outside world. So, and then of course, I met people from all over the world. So this isn't just a view of somebody that's just sits from the comfort of his home is making a video. That's kind of why at the beginning of this video I put up the lyrics from a great song by a band called Public Image Limited, that was founded by Johnny Lydon, also known as Johnny Rotten for all you post millennials that don't know who the Sex Pistols were in the punk movement. Because listen, at the end of the day, even though I have some knowledge and authority on this boils down to my view, my opinion, and it could be wrong, but it could be right. So let's talk about this. So, how can I get this YouTube thing to work? Excuse me, it's been a while since I've been on this StreamYard, so I'm trying to get this onto the screen. There we go. So, what I want to talk about is why does it seem lately that politics has invaded? For a while we know that politics has become part of our um, media consumption at all, but it seems now it's getting into uh, you know what many of us consider an escape from the day, living our day to day lives and all of the stuff we put up with, and especially on YouTube and Instagram. Are the main media outlets for social media outlets for folks on that do toy reviews and toy news and talk about their collections, things like that. But why has this happened? Why has this become a thing all of a sudden? The things we used to enjoy to not think about having to pay the bills, or the stuff going on halfway around the world, has now suddenly become a platform for people to push political agendas, both left and right political agendas. And to do that, I need to kind of like start from the back. So in our society, we actually have two visions of how things work that are in conflict with each other. And this is something I came up with. A brilliant man by the name of Thomas Sowell came up with this idea, and I'm not going to put the link in. Just search YouTube for a conflict of visions, and he really breaks down. But basically, there's two visions at play here, and the first one is what they call the unconstrained vision, and it's the belief that nothing is wrong with man's nature. Man is inherently good. Man's natural state is to be happy. It is our institutions that are wrong. And if we can fix our institutions, then man can be happy. That man just wants to be happy. Man is good, but these institutions that are in place crush the man's person's spirit and their soul. And try to go. And then there's the what's called the constrained vision, and it says that man is born flawed, and there are no solutions, only trade-offs. Whatever you do to try and fix a man's flaw, it only creates more problems. The best you can hope for is a trade-off that can be lived with. So the unconstrained vision is basically, hey, we can come up with solutions that's going to liberate everybody. And the constrained vision is that, listen, the problem is the institutions. It's the people that build the institutions. So every time you have a come up with a solution, there's going to be a trade off. It's going to benefit some people. It's going to hurt some people. You just got to decide which end of the spectrum that's going to be on. So that's kind of like the thing, that these are kind of the two, um, you know, core visions that are always has been humanity's, default setting. So because of that, um, you have now what's happening is two things that are driving this. That drives all political action, but specifically now, why is this now impacting uh, our our the things we use to escape, to take a break from the relentless, uh, you know, relentless is a lie. So why are these two things now hitting, something that, listen, toys and, video games and all these things I use just to kind of turn my brain off and forget about the day for a while. Well, there's two things at play here. One is a cultural shift that we have in our society, and then the next is also it's by ideological design. So let's talk about the cultural shift a little bit. And yeah, these are stereotypical millennials. This isn't like a millennial bashing thing. This is just kind of where this idea kind of started, and it's really how we view icons and heroes as a culture. Um, so growing up, we kind of looked at things like say superheroes, for instance. What happened is before is that most people, when they looked at a superhero like Batman and Superman, they didn't look at the surface characteristics of the character. They were ideals to aspire to. The play patterns for most kids were, if you gave a kid an action figure like Superman or Batman or Spider Man or the Incredible Hulk, is that the kid would children would play with these toys um, based on what that hero would do. They identify their play pattern with the core values of that hero. You played Batman. Batman lived by certain rules, and he did certain things. You would approach your play as how Batman would handle that situation. Then what we had is we had this shift in culture where people felt the need to, they wanted heroes that they could identify with. That's they didn't want to become their heroes. They wanted their heroes to become them. So therefore now these heroes would begin to, you would play with you would play with these toys as if this is the way I would react in this situation, not how the character would react. And that's why we had this big push for heroes that was more about their surface characteristics than the inner characteristics as well. I'm not saying this this is all good or bad, but this is kind of how things have changed. Culturally, things change over time. So we had this generational shift in play patterns and the way we thought of heroes, and it tied into something else, and that was by ideological design. And this is one. Listen, this it did start on what we consider the left of this country, and it became this idea. There's this idea that's permeated leftist thought, especially among socialists, is that everything is about politics. All institutions, all interactions were political. And so that had to become part of everyday life. And the idea that in order to create change, remember, it's about institutional change. In order to create that change, is you had to not allow the people that oppose your ideas any relief or escape from the politics. And listen, you don't have to believe me. So one of the books I had to read was I had to read Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. For those of you who don't know Saul Alinsky, Google him, but he was a socialist organizer. And again, it's a very famous book that he put out. It was basically the playbook of how political change happens, how to organize people, make political change happen. And Rules for Radicals, he actually says, all of life is partisan. There is no dispassionate objectivity. The revolutionary ideology is not confined to a specific limited formula. It is a series of general principles rooted in Lincoln's May 19th, 1856 statement, "Be not deceived, revolutions do not go backwards." So it's this idea that everything is political. You have to see everything through a political lens, through an ideological lens, in order to push. It had to be that way. Nobody was supposed, there was no dispassionate objectivity. When you had a conversation about ideology, you couldn't allow for any room to give on the other side. And his famous, Rules for Radicals, rule number 8 is keep the pressure on, never let up. Keep trying new things to keep the opposition off balance. As the opposition masters one approach, hit them from the flank with something new. So really, it was all about this idea that you were not allowed to escape the ideology. If you found pleasure in watching a football game, then we have to insert ideology into the football game. If you found escape watching movies, and it had to be in there too. So everything was about ideology. And famously, from George Orwell, who wrote 1984, An Animal Farm, which I both read those as a junior high student. I read both of those books. And remember, George Orwell, for those who don't know, he was a socialist. He participated in the Spanish Civil War, but his thing is he did not like communists, especially Stalinist people of Stalin. So that basically, both Animal Farm and 1984 were about communism, especially under Stalin, a warning. And so, but in 1940, says, one of the characters says, there will be no curiosity, no enjoyment of the process of life. All competing, I'm sorry, All competing pleasures will be destroyed, but always, do not forget this, Winston, always there will be the intoxication of power, constantly increasing and constantly growing. Always at every moment, there will be the thrill of victory, the cessation of trampling on an enemy who is helpless. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on the human face forever. So it's this idea, that you cannot escape ideology. You have to push it all the time. And if it's if ideology doesn't exist in some form of pursuit or entertainment, then it has to be injected into it. The ideal, though, would be to create the ideology, use that as the foundation of the entertainments of everything you make. That was the goal, is to move it from just injecting to the foundation of it as well. So that's why you've seen this creep in the TV, movies, music, sports. It's happened to sports, books, anything that you could find, even if you agree, even if you agree uh, with liberal principles and ideas, or concern, no matter what you believe in. The goal was that you're not allowed to escape from it. If you are against it, it needs to be in your face all the time. If you are for it, you need to be constantly reminded to keep pushing for it. So that's what happens as we got to this shift in our culture, and this is why it's invaded into these last bastions of escape that we have. So some people they use the you know this concept that, well, listen, hasn't these always been about politics? That's been a big or about these ideologies, and that's been a big cry, for especially with the folks with the new Star Trek stuff. Yeah, and yeah, so like Star Trek, it kind of had, there was a little bit of a ideological, well, it was an ideological foundation that it was built on. But at the end of the day, it wasn't about a particular political belief or a social agenda. It was about this concept that man would improve. It was really that that unconstrained vision of, that man, that once you fix the institutions, that man would flourish and be happy. There's this constant idea of hope that things would get better. Star Wars was never about politics. It really, because yeah, it was, you have these rebels against an evil empire. That's a political, they're in a rebellion. That's political. But at the heart of Star Wars, it was a good versus evil story. It was an age old story of good versus evil. With done with like a very broad stroke political idea of, the lonely rebel hero against this vast kingdom of evil. But it was a good versus evil story. I know Lucas tried to ham fist politics into Episode 3, the prequels, but then it's going for today. It's just kind of mentioned, and the worst one is GI Joe. A lot of people say, "Well, no, it's about the military. It's very political," and the kind of, I started seeing the complaints about this due to recent events and people with certain Joe content, making it very political. And but the heart of the G.I. Joe story isn't politics. And if you read, especially the comics, politics, um, it was it was sometimes used as part of a story device, but at the end of the day, it was a story about freedom versus tyranny, no matter what forms both of those took. And sometimes they would use politics to further that as well. So yeah, so it's kind of always been there, but there's a difference of making, using the ideologies as a way to advance your core, the core of the story, and then versus making it all about the ideology, which is what's happened today. And again, I say it's by design, as it. So some folks say, but doesn't the right do the same thing? You're blaming the left. Um, There's the right doing it. And I said, okay, yeah, listen, no, it's not about assigning blame here because yeah, both sides do it. My only problem has been is that it did originate on the left. These were the guys that figured it out first and propelled it. And by the time, listen, again, as a conservative, the right in this country, we're not, we don't, I don't want to say stupid because it's not the best word for it. We're naive. Ooh, there's a cat out there. The right is very naive. So this has been going on for a while, but then by the time the right figured it out, they didn't understand how it worked. They just thought that it worked, and they started doing things. They would imitate what the left was doing, thinking they'd get the same results. Because they didn't take time to understand it. Because a lot of folks on the right won't go and do stuff and read like Alinsky's Rules for Radicals because it was written by socialists. They won't go read the Communist Manifesto. They won't. They won't actually go read this stuff. So what they do is they see that, well, the left cancels people. They'll dig up something old and they'll use it to cancel folks, and so they'll try to do the same thing too, and it doesn't work that way. So basically, when it comes to the right, does what they're referred to as it's called cargo cult behavior. It's actually a business term, and for those who don't know, that cargo cult behavior refers to the superficial adoption of practice or rituals without understanding their underlying principles. This phenomenon often occurs when organizations mimic the visible aspects of the successful companies, such as their processes or strategies, without grasping the deeper reasons behind it. So yeah, but now, and that's what it is that they saw that it was effective, and so now they're doing it too, but they don't understand why that's important, and they didn't build on that. So now the question becomes, what do we do about it? And honestly, I don't know. There's no solutions. This was not a solution video. This was a why it happened, why people, why this has happened, why it seems that in a space where it actually used to unite a lot of people of different backgrounds to find out that you could be in a place and you could run into somebody and they'll say a line from a movie and you go, oh yeah, I like that movie too. And you could be from any walk of life, any economic background, religion, race, whatever, but we could bond over these things like toys. Like I said, I know a lot of people on both sides of the political spectrum that have a fondness for G.I. Joe, which is my fondness because we grew up with it, we loved it. And for a few minutes, you could talk about these things without arguing. But what now has happened is because of this whole thing is we want to see our beloved things we cherish as children and characters we grew up with. More and more, we want them to validate what we now believe as adults. We want GI Joe to be the America First rah rah, and we want GI Joe to also validate those of us that believe that soldiers should defy orders. That GI Joe would turn on the government. That we want to hear our opinions coming out of the toys' mouths. We want the toys to act and react in situations like we would react to them, and not how the characterizations of it would react. So that's, I don't know, but one of the things we can stop doing though is we can stop becoming so entrenched in our political and ideological beliefs to the point where we devalue the humanity of people that don't believe the same way we have, and let it ruin our appreciation of something that should be bringing people together. That's to me that's the biggest thing. The idea that when somebody on YouTube says something I don't like, then I'm just going to follow their channel, or worse yet, I'm going to attack their channel and try to tear them down. Or I'm watching somebody that I've enjoyed their content for a while, and they find out they don't believe with me. They line up with me in my collecting preferences, but they don't line up with me politically or religiously or whatever. So therefore, I decide I'm not going to follow that guy anymore because he doesn't buy into 100% of the things I believe. And that's what happens. We got to stop becoming so entrenched in all these things that we bring into a space where we should all really, uh, um, all should be uh, enjoying together. One of the as like he's Arthur C. Brooks. He used to run the American Enterprise Institute, which was a libertarian think tank. He's got an amazing story. I encourage everybody to go on YouTube and look for it's about an hour and a half, I think, documentary called The Pursuit, where it's really good. And he's a conservative, and but I take it to heart. But somebody that he doesn't, he thinks that conservatives should not. Well, you watch yourself. So basically, it says there's evidence that as we become less exposed to opposing viewpoints, we become less logically competent as people. So I don't do that. I don't cut myself off from people that have ideas different from me, especially if I'm watching your thing or reading your thing because of a mutual interest. I think those are the times where we can actually come together a little bit and understand each other a bit more. Um, Again, I didn't think, like I said, I don't know what the solutions are to this problem. But I think that the more we understand why it's happened, why it's become this way, why have these things that we used to just go to for enjoyment and to take a break from the drudgery that is life, has now become infected with the things we're trying to get away from, the things we're trying to just forget for a few moments, in order to keep our sanity. Why it's been driven into that, and I'm always suspicious of people that want to divide people, um, as well. Um, so so hopefully, like I said, take what you will from this. Again, I could be wrong, I could be right. This is kind of how I see why this has happened. And it's up to us. Hopefully, this is just a phase that we're all going through. That we'll get back to these gentler pursuits as well. Otherwise, it's about people, wanting to control others and making people want to think that I want people to think like I think. And I'm really not a big fan of that. Because you can force people um, into this. So again, like I said, it's kind of a rambling video. This is something I'm not going to post a link to this on my social media. I'm just hoping people will find it organically and have a conversation around this. Um, the ideology and political discussion and all that stuff, it has its place. I personally don't think it needs to be in our entertainments, our safe spaces, for lack of a better term, where we can just go and enjoy ourselves for a little while and kind of put those cares behind us. I'm not saying don't make content like that. I'm just saying, don't get bent out of shape if somebody doesn't like it, or somebody does content that you don't like. Just learn to be better to each other, and go out and play with some toys, take some pictures, enjoy it. So with that, I'm going to be quiet. Bye.